Feel free to just get the mic right on.
Cool.
And we got it limited and everything in there, so we're pretty much broadcast ready. So, yeah.
We live?
We are live.
What's up, man?
Welcome back to another Artist Lounge, whatever number this is, because I'm backed up like 4 or 5 episodes. I apologize to everybody else in advance who I've been texting, and I was like, man, like, I got to edit this. I apologize ahead of time, but we've got to, and I say this every single time because everybody's a special guest on the program, YouTube, vlog, whatever you want to call it. But this artist is currently residing in Raleigh, North Carolina, spent some time in New York City, Nashville, immersing himself in both of those cities in the songwriting circuits. This is the first guest who is hailing with gold and platinum records.
Oh.
So I'm not going to put you on the spot here quite yet, but
right.
This is exciting for me because
Nice.
it means that the show is gaining a little bit more momentum. It's pretty cool to be in the room with such greatness. Please help me welcome the guy with my same first name, but different last name.
But similar, though.
Similar.
Yeah.
Jason Adamo. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, man.
Hey, man.
And it's Damico,
Yes, sir.
a paisan.
Capisci? Yeah, Italiano.
Some people will say Adamo for me, but I correct them. Adamo.
Adamo.
D'Amico. But it's
yeah.
Adamo.
Well, it's actually mine had the apostrophe,
Oh, okay.
but my parents nicked it because of kind of like the Y2K era,
Oh, okay.
where the 90s, everything was getting computerized.
Right.
So
I still get mail. My middle initial's D. So
Okay.
sometimes I'll get Jason D'Adamo with the apostrophe. Instead of the D period, they put the apostrophe.
that's awesome.
It's people have, I'm sure they butchered your name over the years.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's great. Basically a 50-50 chance of Adamo or Adamo, and people usually get Adamo.
I've had Damico, Damico,
Right.
Damico, which is actually probably the legit way to say it,
Oh, really?
but
Right. Right. I feel you. It's something my wife is getting used to still, for sure. It's a last name, but
right.
goes with the territory, man.
Yeah.
Italian.
Yes.
And in a vowel.
Well, let's start with because I'm sure it happened a lot when you were a kid. The name always getting
Right.
in school, but it leads me to the first bullet point, which I usually start with on the show, which is beginning stages.
Okay.
Music and you. How did it happen? Where did it come from?
Well, I gotta thank my folks, definitely, especially my mother. My mom, who recently passed about 4 months ago.
Wow. Sorry to hear that.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
She had an angelic voice. She was great with harmonies and stuff. And she came from a family of 6 children, and all of her sisters and my mom. They were taught by my grandmother how to sing harmony and stuff. And my grandmother, I'm not sure if you're familiar with like the Andrew sisters or the older like family harmonizing groups from like the 30s and 40s.
Okay.
She wanted her kids to be that, basically.
Is it kind of like Grand Ole Opry
More
in a way? Or?
From New York, though.
Okay.
Not so much the country thing, but
I got
more
you.
of like the.
What type of genre was that then?
It was just like, I guess, standard classic tunes sung in 4-part harmony.
Gotcha.
So my grandmother taught my mom and her sisters 4-part harmony. My mom was, according to my aunts, the most natural of a singer, period, but also when it comes to harmony. And then she met my dad in high school out on Long Island, and my dad was singing or trying to sing in like doo-wop groups and stuff. I guess for like talent shows, not really like trying to do it, but like in school, in high school.
Right.
And they, literally from date one, they were teaching each other songs and stuff. And that was something that connected them. And then later on in life, connected my entire family. I'm one of 5 kids, and we used to grow up singing in the household all the time. My parents were very Christian growing up. We would have like a Bible night / music night, basically, where we would sing in the living room and whatnot. But I definitely got the music bug from my parents, for sure. How did it get started from there?
Well, I was going to say, so singing came first.
Singing definitely came first.
And then was guitar I don't know if you're a multi-instrument. Are you a multi?
I can play a little piano, and
Okay. I had a feeling that you were.
That's more of like a joke, though. I can't really play the piano.
Well, it
I
could
can
be
play Lean On Me and stuff, like really simple chords.
Do you ever use it as a writing tool?
No, not for me. Period.
Okay.
Personally, but when we're in the studio, sometimes we'll come up with some melodies on a keyboard or piano where somebody else is playing it.
Right.
And
right.
I never learned how to read music, so I probably should have stuck with piano lessons at 13. I think I quickly dropped those and picked up the guitar right then.
Okay, so piano did come first.
Piano shortly before guitar,
Okay.
because I refused to practice piano,
Right.
and refused to learn what they were trying to teach me. And my dad had an old Harmony acoustic under his bed that I had my eye on every time he would leave the house. I would go up there and pull it out from underneath the bed and start tinkering with it. And then eventually, when I gave up the piano lessons, I decided to try to give it a shot. And he had inside the case, he had like a Bob Dylan songbook, like 3-chord, 3 chords in the truth, as they say.
Right.
Bob Dylan songs like "Blowing in the Wind" and whatnot. And I tried to figure it out on my own. I got enough interest in that to ask my mom for a different type of lessons, and she took me to some guitar lessons, which lasted like a month. I wanted to like cut all the practicing and stuff and just go right into like Van Halen stuff, like finger tapping and whatnot. And I dropped those and basically relied on either just by ear, or as I started singing with other people in groups, I would have the lead guitar player teach me a thing or two.
Pick something up along the way.
Exactly. Everything that I can play on the guitar has been picked up along the way, pretty much, just from ear or by other.
Was it a struggle? And if so, what were some of the biggest struggles for you? Because for me, when I started, I was always a drummer first, and that was where I had classical training and everything as like percussion and reading and all that. So, but I wanted to write songs and melodic instrument. And it was the same thing with me. Piano, my mom got me started at like 3, but I hated it at the time.
That's young.
Totally hated it.
That's probably the time you should start to get really good.
Well, they saw that I had an affinity towards drums, and I just, they said, okay, let's get him some drum lessons.
That's cool. To be drawn to a certain instrument young is really good.
Yeah.
Instead of somebody like pushing you on one, if they see that you're taking interest in another one, and they just kind of like,
well, they made the right choice. I mean, as far as me being in this industry.
Well, did they?
With the uncertainty of the entertainment industry.
They were cool with you banging on the drums, though.
Oh, yeah.
Because that takes a very special parent.
Yes. Yeah, both of them. Yeah, for sure. But in the sense of with guitar, with the struggles, when I was 10, it was the same thing. Like my dad always had guitars laying around the house, so I would pick one up. But for the damnedest longest time, at least 6 months to a year, I couldn't make a sound on a thing. And I didn't ask for help until it got to the point where it's like, what is going on here? I said, why? I was like, Dad, why is this not working? And he goes, oh, you're not pressing down hard enough with your left hand.
Oh, right.
That was basically the only lesson I ever had. And then after that, it was like, oh, okay, now it makes sense.
Right.
So I don't know if you have any funny...
Well, I know that, like, now that we're calloused over on our left hand, are you left hand or right hand?
Yeah.
You play the left,
yeah.
The first month or so, when I was actually first started really trying to play the guitar, as most guitar players, amateur guitar players, get the sensation that your fingertips are just bleeding because it's just hurting so much just playing a D chord or whatever.
Right.
After I pushed through that, it was smooth sailing. Getting back to the beginning of things, I was always writing lyrics, even at a young age, just like poems or whatnot. So I wanted to, and I was always singing. So I wanted to pick up something, definitely some sort of instrument to accompany this and try to write songs.
Right.
Instead of just like writing them down and singing them a cappella, whatever. I wanted to be able to strum the guitar and form a song of with an instrument.
Well, you and I are similar then in that sense, because it really was more of like I've already been playing drums for almost 10 years at that point, my early teen years, and was like, I want to try and write.
So 13 was about the same age?
I really started making sounds when I was 10,
right?
But it really didn't turn into a thing until like beginning of high school,
right?
For me,
okay,
yeah, so guitar,
about the same age, yeah. But putting songs together and stuff.
Yeah, again, like trying to write. Well, I only knew a couple of chords at 10, 11, or 12.
Right. I still only know a couple of chords, pretty much. But it's good enough to write songs.
Good enough to make a platinum record, man.
That one's about 4 chords, probably.
Hey, that's all you need. That's all you need.
But yeah, man, once I started playing guitar and putting together songs and then like trying to perform in front of people, I was just hooked.
Yeah.
So just everything kind of started happening from there.
What,
From the bedroom to the high school stage.
Yeah, well, you're hitting all these bullet points. This is great. High school, any memorable moments and also influences? So Bob Dylan, are there any others that come to mind immediately back in high school that...
Oh, man, high school. I mean, I graduated high school in 1996, so 1992 is when I entered high school, and that's right when like one of my favorite bands ever, Pearl Jam, was just completely on fire. Actually, my first...
So much great music.
Oh,
and
man.
STP, Pearl
From
Jam.
the 90s.
Oh, God.
It was a great time
Alice
to
in
be
Chains.
alive, let alone try and play music, or trying to just
Yeah.
dig into music. I mean, a lot of people not grunge. I was just talking about grunge with my producer buddy the other day about how what was good grunge in the 90s, what was just completely just sell out grunge. I mean, I was telling him I didn't even like the term grunge, but especially when it applied to Pearl Jam, my favorite band back then and still today.
They oh my God, man.
They wrote such great songs, and then Mike McCready on guitars,
Stellar.
I mean, if you're playing just like 3 chords, bar chords, and hitting that distortion pedal back in the 90s, that's considered grunge a lot of the times. But when you see Mike McCready completely shredding on the guitar, that's just a different level for me. And their songwriting was on a different level for me than other bands. So I think when you asked about like in high school, like if there was a moment, sophomore year, I think it was. Sophomore year, I decided to try out for the talent show.
High school,
yeah. And of course, I had to play a Pearl Jam song.
right?
I played acoustic solo Alive from 10.
Good old A.
Oh, man.
Great song in A.
And pretty much no other, like, it wasn't really, I wasn't doing Pearl Jam justice in the guitar playing aspect of that song. I was just playing A, G, whatever the chords were.
Right.
Wasn't trying to do anything fancy. I was mostly just trying to do my best Eddie Vedder impression and get off stage without vomiting all over myself. I was so nervous, man. I had been on stage before. I had done some plays and stuff in middle school. But when I was getting ready to play guitar and sing in front of a crowd of probably a couple hundred people, I was backstage literally trying to hold back the chunks as they were. As soon as I got off the stage from that, it was life-changing experience. I mean, for me, and I have it on video, which is really cool.
That's awesome.
Hitting that chorus of "I'm Still Alive," the crowd starts cheering, and I can remember like it was yesterday. I'm getting goosebumps from like ankles all the way up to the earlobes, man. Just right then, I knew that's what I want to do. This is what I want to do. I want to be able to play and perform in front of people and get that reaction. Now it hasn't happened like that every time I perform, where a high school crowd is cheering. But that moment was like pivotal moment in my life for sure. And actually, the band after me, they were playing YYZ by Rush. They did not have a lead singer. So after the talent show, they were like, "Hey man, you want to be our lead singer?" And they birthed a band the night of the talent show. My first band.
Wow.
So
Wow.
yeah, man, there's great memories from back in the day of getting on stage and just doing it. See what happens.
Yeah. So the songwriting, do you remember anything pivotal as well in the high school years as far as, writing wise?
Well, so a year after that talent show, the high school back then, this is Blacksburg High School, by the way. Shout out to Blacksburg, Virginia, where Virginia Tech is. It's where I grew up. Blacksburg, the theater department there would have a night called Comedy Night Live, which is basically Saturday Night Live for high schoolers.
Oh, cool.
So I tried out to be a cast member in that. And then based on my previous talent show experience, I consider myself a full-blown musician at that point too. And I said, hey, now that I'm in the cast, I was accepted into the cast, and they were looking for a musical guest. And I was like, well, I got you right here too. I can do that too. And I write my own songs, by the way. So at this point, I was writing my own songs. cheesy love songs about girls I had crushes on in high school. Basically, I think that's where we all started.
Oh.
That first or sophomore, or I guess junior year of Comedy Night Live, I was musical guest and cast member, and I got up there and performed my original song. This song is not for you was the title. The song is all about this one girl, but it's not for her because she didn't want me back. I was in love with her, and she didn't. It wasn't reciprocated.
Yeah.
But that was like
sounds like the story of my life.
There you go.
So David Lee Roth, right? I don't get the girls I want, just get the girls that want me.
Right. I was striking a nerve even back then, man. No, I was extremely nervous then too, because it was also not just performing for like the fourth time on stage, but bearing my soul as it was in high school.
Right.
Singing for the first time words that I'd written on my bed in my bedroom in front of the same crowd. Mm-hmm. So, and all my peers too.
Oh yeah,
it's like no judging there.
No big deal.
If it had gone bad, it would be like I'd have to change high schools. But no.
So it went well.
It went well.
You didn't have to change high schools.
I did not get that girl, but
right. But now looking back, at least in my experience with situations like that, it happens for a reason.
Right. I think so. I'm a firm believer in things.
Yeah, I mean, you have in this business, you have to, or else you'll go crazy.
Right.
We're already crazy enough.
Right.
Don't push me over the edge. Right.
Exactly.
It's like I'm not going to push myself over the edge with thinking that there has to be a reason why, and if you don't know why right now, give it time, and it probably will reveal itself.
Years and years later, that's been my experience, definitely. Maybe even like days or months later, but in my experience, just looking back on the years, it all has led me to where I ended up, for sure.
What in your opinion makes a great song? As far as, there's so many different there's the standard A B C B type format. Do you do a solo instead of a bridge?
Right.
Do you what are your thoughts on it? Especially with the Pearl Jam influence. Right. I'm really interested this because they were all over the place with their arrangements.
Oh yes,
and I tip my hat off to them for breaking those molds.
And songwriting subjects too. It's like Jeremy was taken from an article in the newspaper, and then songs about Eddie's father. Deeply personal songs were on the same record as songs about something not completely made up, but just pulling out of the news articles. For me, it's honesty.
Right.
For me. You can write a great song completely made up, within a room with other songwriters, just like, what are we writing about today? And it just so happens to just work out to where it's very catchy or it becomes a hit song based on, completely made up material. Or you can find the same number one song or a hit song based out of somebody's breakup or, a death in the family or something deeply personal to the writer. I think for me personally, I just prefer honesty nowadays. When I first started writing more honest songs is where I started feeling better about being a songwriter.
Right.
Instead of just to do it. You know what I mean? Right. Or like, what am I going to write about today? Oh, that girl's pretty. I'm going to write about that girl.
Yeah.
And how I'm in love with that girl I barely know,
Right.
Or you can go through, live life a little bit and then put that into your material. I think it's way better.
Bob Rock talked about, somebody asked him in an interview recently, like what is the key to creativity or whatever, something to that extent. And he said, like, stay inspired, inspiration.
Right.
And that really hit me to the core because I think all conviction and all honesty stems from there. And there's like deeper and deeper revelations of inspiration. Like as I get older, I'm only in my mid-20s, but there's just certain things that it's not even worth trying to write about.
Right.
Because it's like, all right, been there, done that.
Yeah.
Or, it's not real enough. It's not real enough.
Right.
What is going on?
Right.
What is happening right now?
Yeah.
Let's not beat around the bush. And I think the Beatles were a great example of that with their writing. And they wrote stuff that was off the wall as well. But,
which was just as good.
Right.
Which I hate them for. And love them for.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, go ahead.
Well, I'm just going to say, I think therapeutically, I'm not sure, I can't speak for every songwriter, but most that I've talked to, and I'm sure you might even agree, is if you're going through something that sucks, writing about it helps. If you're going through something that's amazing, writing about it even amplifies that even further. And if you can get a good song out of whatever you're writing, some of these writings just don't amount to anything, but it's therapeutic for me. If you can write something that's therapeutic and has a nice hook or a catchy melody and go into the studio and record it, put it out there, it's sometimes for me, it's very healing. Like if I'm going through something bad or something sad, it's very healing to put it out there and then have people say, hey, I really connected to that. Even though they didn't go through what you were going through, they can relate to it somehow, some way, or interpret it in
or maybe
their own
they
way.
did in their own way or at a different time,
Right.
Well, writing process, walk me through that for you, usually, whatever that looks like. And so everybody's got their own thing, right? Like I'm the guy who, if you went through my voice memo app,
Yeah.
I'm the guy who literally has like 1,000 clips.
Right.
95% of them go nowhere.
Exactly.
But it's that other 5 to 2 or 3% that.
And thank goodness for the technology we have today.
Yeah.
Back in the day, you'd have to hit play and record at the same time on this little tape cassette recorder that I had. But now, like you're driving down the road and you're humming a melody.
There's something
like,
there.
What song is that? Oh, that's something I'm writing right now. Hit record and get it locked into the phone.
Right.
And then out of 50 that might be in my phone right now, like you said, 1 or 2 I can save and the rest I can delete after listening back to it. But for me, it's kind of all over the board. Whenever I'm asked that question, it's like I prefer a certain way of writing, but then there's songs that have come out of me and in collaboration with other people in a totally what used to be a foreign way to me, but now is collaborating with other people.
When did you start co-writing?
In 2010, 2009.
Oh, wow.
2009.
Okay. So somewhat recently.
Yeah, up until 2009, any song that I put out was all, fell on my shoulders. If somebody liked it or didn't like it, it was all me writing it. And I would bring musicians in to help shape the song, but the lyrics were all mine.
Melody, lyrics,
chords, for the most
whatever.
part. Yeah. Until 2009, I teamed up with Doug Castine, who's still my lead guitar player and writing buddy, and John Briggs, who has produced 3 of my records. We were actually not too far from here in a house in Pittsburgh in 2009, which is, it's crazy to think that 10 years ago now.
Almost 11 now.
Yeah. We were right up the street here, and we were putting together Transistor, which was my 2010 full-length album that we put out as the Jason Adamo Band, where I brought to the table X amount of songs that were finished, X amount of songs that were not finished, and then Doug did the same thing. And then Briggs, he didn't bring full material to the table, but I called him John Bridge, because whenever we were stuck, we needed a bridge, he would just pick up the guitar and be like, that,
right?
Boom, there's your chord changes, and hey, and if we were stuck on a melody, he would be like, well, I can help you out with that too. So that was the first time for me where kind of just boom, like explosion went off, and I was like, wow, that's just incredible how this album came together with just the help and of 2 other guys. Actually, my brother Chris, so 3 other writers on this record. My brother Chris would write poetry, and that year we were just exchanging poetry, and he had just had a son. He was feeling inspired to write a lot about his son, and
right.
I combined some of his poems with some of my poetry or song lyrics, and put 3 songs on that record between he and I. And one of the songs actually was one of the bigger songs on the record was Raleigh Nights. He wrote about a drunk night at the poorhouse one night. He sent me this poem called Raleigh Nights, and I turned it into a song by adding a chorus and melody and trimming what was like 12 verses into like 2 or 2.5.
Yeah.
So it was a huge collaborative effort in 2009 that opened my eyes to collaborating. And I wasn't like gung ho, like every song I wanted to write from that point out was collaboration, because I still consider myself, a solo writer for the most part when it comes to my own material, my own records. But since the band has evolved into at least Doug and I as the two core members that are still like considered the Jason Adamo band. Nowadays he comes to the table with full songs. I come to the table with full songs, and we still co-write some songs, but whatever we put out nowadays is kind of like a Adamo Castine package under the Jason Adamo band name, kind of, you know.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's evolved into something. It has evolved and changed over the last 10 years for sure. Definitely, 2008's EP Sunflower to 2016's End Friends, just totally different style of writing and style of music actually too.
Right.
While we were at it.
Yeah, no, I was listening to Sunflower when I was preparing, and definitely a difference from, because I think you played the Brett Young, I don't know if it was a single, but one of the songs on the record, right? That
on his record.
Yeah.
Right.
Beautiful
Believer.
Beautiful Believer. And I heard that at Lincoln at the songwriter event. Right.
Mm-hmm.
That was one that.
And I put that on 2016's and Friends of my version of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
My version didn't go gold or platinum.
Well, yeah.
Mine went aluminum foils. I think I said that night.
But so Sunflower is the recent release for you.
No, Sunflower is 2008.
2008.
Yeah. That's
I thought it was 2018.
Oh, 2016 is End Friends.
Okay.
2018, nothing yet. 2019, nothing yet. But we're starting to write and record a record that's going to be coming out early 2020.
Okay.
So 2008 is what I was talking about before I started collaborating as a songwriter. But I started bringing in other musicians that were not in my band.
Gotcha.
And that's what sparked the relationship with John Briggs, who ended up producing Transistor 2010, Bricks and Mortar 2012, and co-producing King of Dock Street in 2014. But in 2008, he's one of those guys who plays everything really well.
Right.
So he came in and played keys on Purple Sky off of...
Yeah, I had Purple Sky on here, and what was the Texas Train? That was on a different release.
Oh, man, that was...
But Texas Train is...
nice.
That's
old. That's a deep cut right there, man.
That's some great playing on that.
Oh, thanks, man. That is... Let's see. So the version that I'm guessing that you heard was probably from the Montage EP, which is out there still.
Yes.
That's me playing guitar, JD Leith on drums.
You were taking the jazz solo on that?
Yeah, I was doing that.
Oh, dude,
yeah.
that was sick, man.
Thanks,
I was going to ask you, like, who played that solo in the middle?
That was me trying to play a solo. You know, I
think you nailed it.
Thanks, man.
Well, in my opinion.
I appreciate that, especially coming from you. I don't consider myself. I let Doug Castine do all the lead playing now.
Okay.
But back then it was just a trio. We had a trio called Montage, and it was JD Leith and Benji Roundtree and myself putting that Texas Train song together on that record.
That's killer, man.
Thanks, man. That's one of those songs that's completely made up. Like at that point I had never been to Texas, and I never traveled by train. And I was like, I'm gonna write a blues song or blues jazz rock song called Texas Train.
It's cool.
But yeah, so it's 2008. I brought Derek Olds in as a producer who was in a band called Only Midnight out of Chapel Hill, with the co-lead singer and co-songwriter of Only Midnight was John Briggs. So they had a record deal that went under, the label went under, and John kind of, the band kind of was still around, but not really. And I kind of was like, hey man, we should play some music together. And,
right.
Hey, I definitely want to. And that's when Derek came in and produced Sunflower, and Derek kind of brought in Briggs to help record the instruments on that record. But through that experience, like we went down to Miami together to record the vocals. Mm-hmm. We did most of the tracking here in the Triangle. We became really good friends, and Briggs and I became musical partners from then on. So
nice.
Yeah. And then, which led to in 2013 even moving to Nashville together, renting a house in Nashville together.
So
Briggs.
Well, I want to get to Brett Young.
Yeah.
And that whole experience. So that was around the same. That was a little bit after.
So that
right?
So getting back to what we were talking about, how everything happens for a reason.
Okay.
You might not know it until years and years later.
Yeah.
2011, I was married previously married, and it was a very rocky relationship. I was going out to LA a lot to play, especially 2010, starting to do it on a yearly basis with the NAMM show in Anaheim. Every January we'd go out there and play, and I started making a lot more connections in LA, and I just felt like I was being pulled to LA for some reason. And in October of 2011, I decided to just go out there for a whole month and not leave until I found management and a publicist. A publicist, management, and it just, way more connections out there than I previously had.
Right.
I would go out there for a weekend or a long weekend at a time and play shows and whatever. But then when going out there every January and for NAMM kind of led to me planning more things in LA. And that led to 2011 going there for a whole month, living in Santa Monica for a month. I was living with some friends of mine a couple that, another side story here was I used to play in New York City in the subways many moons ago. We're talking like 2000, 2001. Excuse me. And in a show in San Francisco in earlier in 2011, I met an author of a book who was about busking in the subways of New York City. And when she heard that I did that, I think I talked about an artist named Martin Sexton, who's one of my biggest influences. During my show, she goes, woo! And I was like, oh, somebody knows who Martin Sexton is. Great. She came up to me afterwards and wanted to buy a CD and talk to me about Martin Sexton. I said, well, she goes, I'm writing a book about buskers in New York City. And I know that Martin Sexton, though from Boston, used to do the busking as well. And that's where I've kind of followed his music and stuff. And I was like, well, that's interesting because not only is Martin Sexton just a huge influence of mine, and I've got the pleasure of opening up for him several times, I used to busk in New York City as well. And she was like, oh, wow, well, then you're going to be in my book. I was like, oh, okay, cool. So that started a connection with this author, a friend of mine, who lived in Santa Monica. And through the photo shoots and the doing the publicity for the book in New York City, she extended an invitation to stay with her and her fiance in Santa Monica whenever I was in LA for any time, extended period of time. So when
that's great.
That October of 2011 happened, when I wanted to go out there for a whole month, I was going to go out there with a buddy of mine. That plan, as a lot of the times happens, fell through at the last minute. And I remembered that this author friend of mine invited me to stay with them whenever I needed to. So I took her up on that offer, and I crashed in their guest bedroom for a whole month. I got my license to perform on the promenade and the Santa Monica Pier, busking out there too.
Right.
She knew a lot of the.
How often were you playing? Like every day, basically.
Out there?
Yeah.
I was either playing a show, I think I set up which is way too oversaturation, too much oversaturation for one city in 1 month. But I played 8 shows that month in LA. And then a lot of songwriter open mic nights and whatnot.
Okay.
But almost every day I was out there busking to just be able to send money back to Raleigh, for bills and whatnot, and be able to eat and do whatever I needed to do out in LA for that whole month. So yes, and a lot, and I made actually pretty decent money out there busking, which was awesome.
How often would you change locations as far as were you primarily in Santa Monica when you were playing out on busking, or?
Yes, it was only in Santa Monica.
Okay.
Because I had a license from the city of Santa Monica.
I gotcha.
And you can't busk in Santa Monica without a license.
It's like New York, or at least the subway system. I don't know how it is. Like Times Square in the subway system, you have to have a license.
Right.
Yeah.
When I lived there, you didn't.
Okay.
This early 2000s.
So now it's.
But I have friends who
changed.
do now. Yeah.
Yeah.
They talk about how you have to audition for it and whatnot.
I read about that online.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in Santa Monica, you just go there with $35 and 2 passport photos, and they give you a permit. But then you have to, if you want to play the promenade, which is Santa Monica Promenade. It's like a.
I haven't been there yet, but I've heard of it.
It's like a big outdoor shopping area that they closed off the road permanently many years ago, where it's like pedestrian road now.
Okay.
Right, maybe 3 blocks from the beach. It's all your major big name stores. Like there's an Apple store there and whatnot, but also lots of restaurants, bars. Mostly clothing and stuff being sold there. Anyway, there's allotted spots along the promenade that you can just show up and claim. But on the pier, you have to go there in the morning and win a lottery for one of those spots. So I would wake up in the morning, like crack of dawn, and go over there to the pier where you had all these people like, completely covered head to toe in silver. And they were like statues that if they got tipped, they would move and stuff like that. Yeah, they had like fortune tellers and stuff. And
wow.
A lot of musicians with their little cubes, battery operated cubes and mic stands. And if some days you would just not get either you would not get a spot or you would get a spot that you didn't want. And you would just go home and just call it a day because you would stay out there all day and not make any money.
Right.
I learned that at the very end of the pier where past the Ferris wheel and all that stuff, there's like basically what looks like a theater style seating where a lot of people will sit down and watch the sun go down. That was the best spot. That's where you could make like, a couple $100 if you stayed out there all day. Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent.
No, it's cool. It's cool.
My friend who was connected very well in that area of songwriters in that Santa Monica, Venice Beach area, she brought me out to meet several musicians, and one in which was her friend Brett Young.
Okay.
Who was a bartender / musician at this one place in Santa Monica. There was like a rooftop. It's called the Sonoma Wine Garden, where he would bartend on some days, and then on every Wednesday or Tuesday night, I can't remember the night, he was the musical act. And he told me he talked his way into just doing that because he was like, this place needs live music. And he talked to his manager, said, hey, on slow nights, I can play here, and you can pay me or not pay me, and then, we can work it out later if it's a success or whatnot. And it turned out to be very, over the couple years he was doing it, very popular. So she brought me to that. And he got me up there to play a set, and we hit it off, exchanged numbers. And I said, next time I'm in LA, which I plan to do a lot more often now after living out here for a month.
Right.
Let's do some shows together and whatnot. So that led to playing more shows next time we were in town. And then that led to, I moved to Nashville in 2013. He moved in early 2014, and in a city where we don't know very many people, you hit up everybody that lives there. Yep. And he did that when he moved there, and we started hanging out and drinking a lot of whiskey and going out and networking. And then eventually found ourselves writing a song, and that song, I don't know if you want to talk about that later, but that song came about in a pretty cool way of a night after a night of networking. So. Yeah, no, we can definitely get into it. Cool. So for that song, Beautiful Believer with Brett, we were living in Nashville. He had only lived there for like less than a month at that point, but he was already being talked about a lot in the town. Had some connections, and he was being invited to a lot of number one parties. We went the same week. We went to Blake Shelton's number one party for a couple of his he had like 2 number one hits that they were celebrating. And a few days later, he hit me up and said, "Hey, Adamo, you want to go to another number one party?" I was like, "Of course." That's what I'm here for. I was going back and forth from Raleigh to Nashville. Had a house in Nashville. Stay there as much as possible until my checking account was next to zero, and I would network and go out and write songs and stuff. So I was like, "Yeah, man, that's what I'm here for." So I went out to a number one party for an artist named David Nail for a song that he had that hit number one called "Whatever She's Got." There's 2 songwriters on the song, and one of the songwriters was a guy named John Knight, who at the time was just beginning to start getting some hits. And at this time, it was like, I think just a few number one hits to his name, but now he has like 20 something number one hits. So in early 2014, he had a couple of hits, and he was up there just talking about how, he moved to Nashville in 2000 whatever, and he and his wife moved there on very little money and were living in a motel for a little while, just trying to make whatever he could make happen as a songwriter. And as most musicians know, and most everybody knows, the music industry is very difficult to crack into. He was talking about this during his speech and saying how many times he wanted to give up. And his wife was like, "No, if we need to be poor, we'll be poor." But myself and our daughter, who's now 16 at this party, back then was just a little baby and stuff. And she's like explaining to him, "We're not moving back to wherever I forget where they moved. They're from, but hardly anybody's from Nashville." She said, "We're not moving back there. We're staying here. And one day you're going to be a hit songwriter." And he was like, and sure enough, this is like my 4th number one hit and she's right over there, and my daughter is right over there. And
Wow.
I want to thank her, and he called his wife a beautiful believer. And Brett and I had already scheduled a writing session for the next day, and we looked at each other and like,
well, yeah.
There's a song right there, man.
That's it.
So we got together the next day. Brett was supposed to write with a girl named Annie Wilgen, who's also a friend of mine, later in the day, and his morning write went long, and so he squeezed my write with his write with Annie, so it became a three-way write, and we started writing. She wasn't there the night before, but we told her what happened with the speech and how it was inspiring. And we wanted to write a song called Beautiful Believer and base it loosely on this guy's speech. We made up a bunch of stuff about, the details and stuff. But yeah, that's for 2 hours of work, like almost 6 years ago. It's like, it's crazy.
Well, that's real songwriting talent, especially taking, inspiration out of a moment, and it's not necessarily from you intrinsically, but you're taking it from the environment.
Exactly. Yeah.
And translating that.
Right. And in that room, like when we were talking about the collaboration thing, at this point I was kind of already really warmed up to that. Mm-hmm. And in Nashville, that's all they do is write songs together. So in Nashville, I still felt like a fish out of water because I was still kind of new to it, but I had collaborated enough to where I was more comfortable going back and forth with Brett and Annie, like this line, this line, this line, this line, and then before you knew it, we had a song completed. It doesn't always happen that quickly, but when it's what we thought was a strong song, sometimes it happens like that, really, really quickly. So we were very excited about it. We didn't know what was going to happen with it. At that point, Brett wasn't, signed to anybody or anything. And then fast forward to like 2015, I'm watching a movie in Cary with my brother, and I get a text from Brett saying, "Hey man, I just signed with a Big Machine label, and Beautiful Believer is going on the record." And in the movie theater, I went like this.
Right.
Closed my phone and just kept watching the movie. Well, I told my brother. I showed my brother Chris.
Who
I wrote those songs with. We were watching the movie together, and I just showed him that, and he was like, "All right, on." We got back to the movie, and then
that's awesome.
Still didn't think much of it because record deals don't necessarily mean you're even going to put the record out.
Right.
So
right.
But then Brett's success just went.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. Really quickly, it happened for him.
You said something kind of interesting, and I have another bullet point here on it. There's a lot of co-writing that occurs in Nashville. We didn't talk yet about really your time in New York, so I was curious to see really two things: what happened there,
okay,
what experience you gained, anything you learned, and then also the differences. And I also put LA now because I didn't know you were in LA for a while, but New York, Nashville, LA, just kind of your take on the three different, vibes.
New York I was super young. I was moved up there at 22. Just totally. I mean, I grew up. My parents were from Brooklyn and Queens and Long Island. Grew up going to New York every summer for vacation, but I still had no idea what living in New York was going to be like. So, I grew up in a college town in Virginia, which it's bigger than just like a little bodunk town somewhere in the country, but I was still considered very country according to, New York standards. I get up there and I'm just like, luckily I had family up there. Otherwise I would have probably just packed it up and moved back real quickly.
Right.
But, so I was working in Blacksburg, Virginia, and I wanted to go up to New York. I wanted to do something up there for at least a temporary amount of time. So I called my dad's cousin who he still owns, but owned at that time in Brooklyn, a very well-known jazz studio. A lot of great jazz records have been put out through that studio. It's called Systems 2 Recording Studio. You know this studio? His name's Mike Marciano. Joe Marciano.
That's nuts. I've talked with him on Instagram.
Oh, really?
I believe does he still own the place?
He still owns it, but now he has it in his home studio in Long Island.
Okay, so that's weird. You and I, we got to talk about that later because that's where Typo Negative did all their records, and I'm a big Typo fan.
There you go. Well, you're gonna love the story I have to tell you.
This is crazy.
Yeah, that's awesome,
that's
man.
Crazy.
I was just talking about
thinking,
this.
Is he going to say Systems 2? Because there's not many recording studios in Brooklyn that I know of. And they invited me to come check out the studio at some point.
Awesome.
I just haven't had time.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll get into that later off camera.
I was just talking about not only Systems 2, but Typo Negative the other night.
Wow.
Well,
Small world.
At that Nashville thing.
Oh, really?
At Lincoln Theater. We were backstage talking about it.
Cool.
Because Blaine, the guitar player in the back, who's playing the Strat.
Yeah.
He's from New York.
Okay.
So we were kind of talking about New York.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
2000, I move up there. So I call I call him Uncle Mike because he's my dad's cousin, older than me, 20 years older than me. And I say, Mike, I'm really interested in learning, the ins and outs of the recording studio. Can I come up there and intern? He said, yeah, definitely. So he actually offered me some money too, a very small wage, but most internships that I had heard of were unpaid. It still wasn't enough to live in New York City. So my mom, her cousin Pat, on my mom's side, not the Italian side, she still had a brownstone in Brooklyn off Avenue K in Flatbush that had been in my family since.
It's a nice area.
It is. Well, there's one side that's very nice and one side that's not as nice, and we were on the not as nice side.
Okay.
So I don't know if you Flatbush. One side is very, very, very nice, and then one side is.
I guess I've been in the nice area.
Yeah.
I haven't really.
I mean, it's still nice. The houses, they're nice, but at this point, the family house was almost 100 years old and run down, and she was still living there with her 4 cats. And she was like, well, this house is, I don't want you living here, but I just kind of inherited / purchased a house across the street that I'm redoing. If you can put up with the noise of construction on the first floor during the day, you can have a room for free upstairs across the street from the family home. And I said, what was that? Free? And I said, yes, let's do that.
In New York.
Exactly, yeah. And it was not too far from the train to get me into the city and all that stuff. But it was supposed to be for a 3-month internship, and that turned into a 3-year stay in New York City. So
you were at Systems too?
I was at Systems 2 for that whole summer.
Wow.
While Type of Negative was doing their greatest hits record where they recorded 2 new songs. But that was the first time I also saw... who's the guitar player?
Kenny.
That was the first time I ever saw, because he also played keys, and I don't know if you know this, but he played a lot of the drum parts on a synth.
That might have been Josh. Josh Silver did all of the
his name was Josh,
programming and whatnot. Yeah.
Josh was doing. That's the first time I ever seen somebody do a drum part on a keyboard.
Right.
I was like, whoa, dude! And he was like basically an amazing drummer on a keyboard. I was like, oh my God,
that's nuts.
And all that stuff. Yeah, it was pretty crazy. There was a very cool experience, but it was the only
That was when they didn't have a drummer. Like they did, but they never used him in the studio for a certain amount of years for whatever reason.
Right.
Not sure why.
At the time, he was telling me sometimes they would program the drums and then the drummer would come in and do whatever.
Yeah, well, they were self-producing. They knew exactly what they wanted, and they had a couple of drummers. They going back to the Carnivore days. Mm-hmm. That was the band before Typo, and I think they recorded at Systems 2 with Carnivore, which was like 83,
probably
82, and that's how they really got their.
Yeah, it definitely happened there because as the story goes from my cousin Mike.
This is unbelievable.
That's how they stayed so loyal to Systems 2,
right?
Because they got, I guess, probably came in at night for cheap and recorded their early recordings there, and then when they had a budget, they even came back and paid it back to the Marciano family. So
wow,
yeah,
everything that ever came out of Systems 2 with they did everything out of there as far as their entire discography.
Right.
Always, there's so much liveliness, and I mean it's Typo, so yeah, of course, but the sound just it always took me somewhere.
Yeah,
didn't matter what record it was, but
it was an old movie theater.
Special studio.
Systems 2 was an old, Nickelodeon, way old. Nickelodeons were not just the channel, but
right.
I didn't know this until I worked there, but it was like pay a nickel and you watch all the movies you want all day.
Yeah.
It was a small size, but still movie theater back in the day in Brooklyn, and they suited it up to be a studio. With the main room was in the main movie theater area, and the B room where they did all the mixing and mastering, and where actually Typo did their stuff was in the B room, which is in what would be behind the screen in the back of the theater. But anyway, Yeah, so living in New York and working there,
Wow.
I just fell in love with what I was doing up there. And I actually had a band in Blacksburg, Virginia. And I was like, guys, I'm not coming back.
How long were you in New York for?
3 years.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, I was supposed to be there for the summer.
Right. You said, okay.
So I went up there in June. I was going to come back 3 months later, and I ended up coming back 3 years later. I started after the internship, I wanted to I decided I wanted to live up there. I had to figure out where I was going to live and how much rent I could afford and whatnot, and how many jobs I had to get to afford rent in New York City. So I got a job at the Bottom Line, actually, which was a music venue that no longer exists.
Yeah, this is Billy Joel's stomping ground way, way, way back in the day, right?
Bruce Springsteen, all these guys. When I got there, it was 2001, and it was either, it sat about 500 or so, or the room was filled with 500. And you either saw people coming on their way up or people who were well established in the 60s and 70s and coming back either because they were friends with Alan Pepper and the owners, or because their career just wasn't what it used to be. They were playing smaller rooms at that point. So I saw anyone from Clive Davis showcasing Alicia Keys there to Jefferson Starship and a bunch of older like 60s and 70s acts, but a lot of I don't know if you know Mike Errico.
Yeah,
he does the looping. He did the looping thing back in the late 90s, early 2000s. He blew my mind. I immediately bought all his records. Anyway, I was working there and I was selling merch for the artists, or ripping tickets and sitting people down in their assigned seats and stuff. So I got to see a lot of great shows. That was kind of like going to a songwriter college for me, just watching these amazing songwriters get up there on stage and do it. So for about a year there, I worked there, and I worked at the Reebok Sports Club on the Upper West Side, and I worked in the subways, just trying to scrape together rent, which I was often late to my friend Justin Jones, who I apologize again. But yeah, man, New York was awesome. I used to play all up and down Bleecker Street and places that are now long closed, like Kenny's Castaways and a place called the Elbow Room, and then on the Upper West Side at the Triad Theater, which is still there. It was great. I was still doing I'm my lone songwriter self, not really. I was collaborating with other musicians for gigs, but not. That's where the collaboration stopped. Just basically hired guns to help me play as a trio from time to time. Moved back to Blacksburg for a summer, and then made my way down to Raleigh in 2003.
What prompted you to Raleigh?
My brother Chris, who mentioned earlier as a songwriting buddy or partner, he just got his master's at Virginia Tech, and he wanted to teach history somewhere. And he had a connection in Raleigh at a school in Wake Forest who said they had an opening there, and he got a job as a teacher at Franklin Academy in Wake Forest, and decided to move here. Bought a townhouse, and my ex-girlfriend and I, we had these grand visions of moving out to LA together from New York. My ex-girlfriend still lived in New York. We were still together. Right. At the time, while I was trying to figure out what I was doing next, I was back in Blacksburg making money, working for my dad's company, a construction company. And my brother was like, just come down to Raleigh and live with me rent-free, and you figure out the LA move from there with your ex-girlfriend, with your girlfriend at the time. And we broke up shortly after that. And I was like, well, Raleigh's really cool, man. I started getting played on 96 Rock recently, or not too long after moving to Raleigh. Wow. And I was like, wow, so I'm playing my stuff on the radio. I'm getting people coming out to shows and stuff. This might be a cool medium-sized city to live in and try to create as a home base for my music, whatever my music's going to turn into now. And that shortly after that, I started playing with people like Bongo John. I don't know if you know.
John. Met him over at Ryan Massacre's house. A couple of months back at a jam party. Yeah. Okay, yeah. And we're Facebook buddies. So
yeah. Well, he's one of the first people who came up to me and said, "Hey, man, I like what you do. Let's work together." When I moved to Raleigh.
Okay, so you tracked with him then, right? Because he's had his studio for years.
Oh yeah, I tracked with him in 2003.
Small world.
We put out it doesn't even exist anymore, but it's like a 11-song album called Kindred Soul, and I pressed copies of that myself, like folding the lyric sheet or the credit sheet, album cover, sliding it into the jewel case, not even shrink wrapping it, just selling it. I probably made a couple hundred copies. So somewhere they exist out there. I don't even have a copy of myself. But he was a great guy. He still is a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
And, he introduced me to a lot of other people in the area, musician buddies that I still, I just played with a friend of mine, Chris Johnson, not too long ago, who I met through Bongo a couple weeks ago. So
That's
many
cool.
years later, besides the stint in Nashville for a couple of years, Raleigh's been home base, man.
What? So real quick,
Yeah.
Going from New York, Nashville, L.A., Raleigh, just in a couple of minutes, like as far as similarities, differences, likes, well, we don't need to go negative with it, but
Right,
it's up to you. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody's got their own style. With I know there's differences in each culturally and musically, artistically,
Right.
But just your take.
Well, trying to immerse myself in each of those cities, I did get a lot of negative experiences, not a lot of positive experiences. So it's like
It's life in
okay.
general.
Yeah, exactly. You can
Just
talk
get up
about
out of bed and it's like, yeah.
right. And if anybody, is thinking about moving to New York or Nashville and LA, or like when I was thinking about doing those things, I was asking about the bad stuff, bad side of each
Right.
city.
Right.
Maybe not so much New York because I was so naive and I just wanted to do it. But Nashville, there's a lot of, like I mentioned, networking is something you have to go out and do. It also involves a lot of drinking. So, the liver took a hit for a couple of years there when I was living there. There's also a lot of politics in every city, really. But in Nashville, you can also either get into those songwriting round or circles, or just kind of wing it on your own from the outskirts, trying to get in there. And sometimes it's very, very difficult to get into those circles because of the politics of that town. And unless you're on a publishing deal, you might not be able to write with people you want to write with because
Things are exclusive or contractually.
Yeah, they just can't do it.
Yeah, they can't do it.
LA was interesting. I wasn't living out there long enough to really get the LA experience, but I've played out there so often. And that 1 month that I did live there, I had a lot of very cool experiences and met a lot of really cool people, but also a lot of very fake people.
I've heard that many times.
Yeah. I mean, everybody, that's the stereotypical LA fakeness. It exists. I mean, that stereotype exists for a reason because there's just a lot of that going on. Raleigh, I love because it's, not as big as New York and LA, or not even as big as Nashville when it comes to the music scene, but it has a thriving music scene in and around this part of the state.
A lot of history.
A lot of history.
A lot of history.
A lot of great
bands,
great songwriters
musicians
coming out of here. It's just a lot more accessible, especially now that I'm, I own a house here and married with a child here. This is home base for the next 30 years or so, according to the mortgage. We have a lot more. Like I can go out and play shows in New York and LA, but this is still like way more home and way more people. My friends who I've made while touring over the years come through here now, and we've set up shows together here.
Right.
It's fun to just do that. And as I get older, the less traveling, the better for me.
Right.
Especially with a 1-year-old at home. So Raleigh's great, man. Raleigh's awesome. It's afforded me a lot of very cool opportunities to open up for some awesome people, to meet a lot of amazing people.
It sounds like New York for you was successful.
New York was successful in the way of shaping me to be who I am today.
Right.
I owe a lot to my songwriting and the way I sing. I owe to New York City, because in the subways, I used to sing like, if you can imagine it, I sang very soft. I didn't try to belt things out back then in the late 90s or so. I mean, when we were covering Pearl Jam, you tried to imitate Eddie Vedder, but for the most part, I was singing very, falsetto-y and very, very softly, and that doesn't fly in the subways if you want to be heard.
It's not audible.
Yeah, because the subway cars just in the crowds.
Forget
and
about it.
So I just learned how to project my voice a lot while singing in the subways.
Yeah,
and I learned how to handle a crowd because you got a new crowd every 5 to 10 minutes. Playing to the crowd and stuff. It was awesome. It was a very, very cool experience.
Wow.
And I was living with my mom's cousin Pat, who ended up being a song on my 2010 record called Patricia, she was the dean of students at Brooklyn College. So she was in her 60s, but she and I got together, got along so well because she was used to dealing with kids my age, and she was so supportive of what I wanted to try to do with my life. And she was like, whatever. And she did encourage me to go back to school and stuff, you know.
Right.
She said, there's no reason you can't pursue music and an education at the same time, which I eventually did go back to school. But she was very supportive and like pushing me towards the music thing. My parents were the kind of parents that weren't like pushing me to all these auditions or this or that, but they were also not telling me to not do that. You know, they weren't saying you can't be a musician, you can't. So they weren't like pushing me, but they weren't saying no.
Right.
But my cousin Patricia was like, hey, this is your dream. You got to go out there and chase it with everything you got. I was like, I had never heard that before. I was like, wow.
Was it worth it?
It was. Definitely, man.
I definitely think so.
Yeah,
man.
Yeah, she passed away in 2006. I wrote a song called Patricia, and the original title was called Thank You, Patricia, because of everything that she taught me and told me and
Wow.
pushed me to do. So that aspect of the New York stay was very, very worth it.
Well, it's, you know, I do something at the end where I do the shootout portion where, and I would have wrote down, I had no idea that you had the extensive studio background.
Right.
You know, I interned for a year at Manifold.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah.
With Ian. So that was back 2016.
Yeah.
So from intern to intern at you know, incredible experience, incredible studio, just like Systems 2.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I hold that bond. I would have wrote down more of this
Right,
for
definitely.
the shootout, but I wrote down a couple more. So I'm just going to say a word.
Sure.
And you just give me like the first word or phrase that comes to mind for you.
Okay.
No judgment zone.
Okay, cool.
Guitar.
It has to be quick, right?
Well, just, you know. What
man.
do you like? What does it mean for you? Personally?
Everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can go with that.
Yeah. Guitar, everything.
Vocal.
Like, I'm already trying to teach my 1-year-old, you know,
Right.
this is a guitar.
Right.
This can save your life.
There you go. Yeah. Vocal mic.
Shure 58, Beta 58. Yep.
That's why they're here. Verse.
Chorus. No. I'm not sure
I
about
have
the
chorus
game.
next, so
Verse.
yeah.
Verse. Keep it short. Don't bore us. Get to the chorus.
Chorus.
Make it catchy.
Bridge. Your friend.
For me, yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it's not necessary, but for like I used to write songs with no bridge.
Right,
But
right.
yeah, now it's very necessary.
I've grown to enjoy them very much over the years.
It can add. It could change the direction of a song.
Yeah,
For the listener, big time too.
Guitar solos.
I can't play them well, but for me, I would have to say Yellow Lead Better.
Oh, yeah. Studio.
Well, I can give another shout out to Systems 2. Here in Raleigh, my last record was at Flying Tiger. Is it Flying Tiger? Yeah, Flying Tiger. Person Street.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've heard of it.
That's where we did my last record. Shout out to Osceola, Dick
Yep.
Hodgin,
Yep.
all the great studios around here. Home studios.
Right.
Nowadays, you can make a record sound very expensive from home. So
We'll give you a tour before you head out.
cool.
Stage.
Lincoln Theater.
I missed it too. It's been a few years since I've walked in there.
Yeah.
Since last or whenever it was this weekend. A lot of good memories there.
Yeah,
Tour.
same here, man.
Touring.
Touring, 2012 Bricks and Mortar tour. We got an RV. And we toured. We played 27 shows in a month. We went from Raleigh in Florida to LA to New York in an RV.
Oh my God.
Yeah, we were not smart about
Wow.
the tour schedule too, because one night we were in Austin and the next night we had to be in Phoenix, which I thought was closer than they actually are. But we went to sleep in Texas and woke up in Texas
Wow.
while we were still driving.
Jeez.
But great memories though.
Songwriting.
From the heart, make it as honest as possible.
New York.
The Big Apple, man. I love it. It's where my family's from, and I love going up there and playing shows.
Nashville.
Same as far as playing shows there, and I try to get there as much as possible. The last time I was there was in May, and it was a great time just visiting friends that I made while living there and sharing the stage with friends that I made while living there.
Yeah. LA.
LA will be going back there in January for NAMM for the first time in a couple
Cool.
of years. Excited to go back. Same deal, same stages that I'm excited about playing at NAMM again, and visiting friends and sharing the stage with friends out there.
Cool. Raleigh.
Man, Raleigh's home, man.
Yeah.
Raleigh's been really, really great to me over the years. I met my wife here when I moved back from Nashville in 2015 and had my first child here.
Reverb.
Reverb Nation or Reverb?
Reverb as in the effect.
Just a little bit. Don't drown in it.
Yeah.
Just enough to make it pretty.
Delay.
Only on Purple Rain.
Drums.
Drums. Find a great drummer and try to get him into the studio. And good luck with that. No.
Yeah.
No, I've had the pleasure of playing with a lot of great drummers in the area, and
There's a lot of good drummers in this area.
Oh man, and I've had the honor to play with some of the best around here.
Yeah.
In one word, 2 words, 3 words, keep the rhythm. Make sure you're on time.
Bass.
Woo.
I got one more after this, so
Okay.
I know I'm drilling you here.
Lock in tight with the drummer.
After the transients, preferably.
Right.
To my ears.
Right.
And Warren Hewitt. Master Bus.
What's that?
Master Bus.
What is that?
So
See, I'm not all there yet. I don't know that.
no, I mean, just your master left and right on the mixing console.
Oh, okay.
You know what I'm talking about.
See, when I interned, you probably had a different experience than me. I got a lot of lunches and dinners, and I was still trying to be the artist, and I was less trying to
Gotcha.
to learn. I wasn't ready to be the guy on that side of the glass yet. I was soaking in the experience of just being around that industry.
Nothing wrong with that, though.
Which was great, and that's probably why I didn't continue with it, because I just had that dream of doing it on my.
It's addicting.
Yeah,
it is addicting.
I mean, I enjoy being in the studio. I just don't know all the technicalities.
So we'll call it mastering.
Mastering,
in a way. Well, they're still not really the same thing, but
right.
So, taking everything, 100 tracks, putting it left and right.
Well, as a singer, make sure you can hear those vocals.
You hear that, folks. You hear that out there.
Right.
Just wanted to check to see that one was still on. One last major question. Well, 2, which are pretty short.
Sure.
I always ask everybody this question on the show.
Okay.
If you could go back in time and tell your 15-year-old self advice, one sentence, one paragraph, what would it be? Knowing what you know now.
Write from the heart, from the start. Like, don't try to just
nice rhyme.
Even if you don't have the life experience yet to write a good song, or just try.
Yeah.
Don't try to write about bubblegum stuff just because you're trying to do it.
Right.
I think I could have progressed as a songwriter sooner and gotten a lot better sooner if I just stayed true to keeping it honest. Yeah.
We can find you on Sundays on 94.7.
Yep.
Okay.
In May, I took over for the Homegrown Carolina Country Show on QDR.
Cool.
9 to 9:30, trying to showcase as much independent North Carolina music as possible.
We'll have to send over some artists that have been on the show that have country roots.
Oh, I'd love it,
your
man.
way. They'd probably love to be on.
Yeah, that'd be great. Please do.
Future plans for you?
For me,
at this point,
like I said, in 2020, early 2020,
new record.
We're going to put out a new record. We're also working on putting out a new kid. So not yet. We're not pregnant yet, but we're working on a sibling for Brooklyn.
Cool.
Which will hopefully happen in late 2020. But right now, I just have some cool shows coming up at the end of the year, and then looking forward to going to LA in January for NAMM, and doing Down the Hatch festival in the Outer Banks in May, which is my date as far as setting a date for the record to be done by the end of May. So I can have copies of it with me at that festival. So festival that my friend Pat McGee from the Pat McGee Band puts together every May, early June in the Outer Banks. North Carolina.
Cool,
so,
cool. What is it, primarily country, or is it?
It's a little bit of everything, man.
A little bit of everything.
Like, last time I played got to play with people like Little Feat.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
People like Chris Trapper. Keaton Simons, Michael Tolcher, a lot of Gareth Asher.
Yeah, let's plug him.
Gareth Asher from Atlanta, Georgia. This is his water bottle here.
That's nice.
Some merchandise I purchased from him.
It's clean.
Yeah, it's nice, and it's it's good for the environment.
Yeah.
Pat has done a very good job of bringing a wide variety of artists from all over the country to the Outer Banks in the end of May, early June, and I've had the pleasure of doing it like 7 or 8 times now. So every year it's something I look forward to. So I want to have the record done by then, so I can have that as to add to my merch table.
That's exciting.
And if I don't set a goal, I'll never do it.
Right.
So.
But we'll have all the links in the description box for everybody to find you.
JasonAdamo.com. Yep.
Yeah, and Jason Adamo, a fantastic website. The .com.
Shout out to Rock Solid Software who designed it.
Yeah. So we'll have that in the box, and Spotify, Instagram, iTunes, Facebook, YouTube, all of those resources we'll put in there.
And if I may, I want to applaud your efforts in doing this. Much like my radio show, doing stuff like this is what we need around here to get the word out about independent artists or artists in general in North Carolina and beyond.
Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah,
thanks for making the drive out.
Definitely, man. Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
That should do it on our end. And don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and this has been awesome. Thanks for coming out.
Definitely, bro.
See you guys on the next one.
Cheers.
Peace.